Hello, and welcome to this 7th installment of Arlington Whenever News. This one is called What's the News? This title may seem somewhat deceptive because this show will contain very little actual news reporting. There are a few reasons for this. First, although I have tried to provide updates on the situation with both Arlington Independent Media and their radio station WERALP, I have been unable to obtain any fresh information. I have reached out to some of the former and possibly present participants for updates, but none of them has even replied to my emails. I have tried to use TuneIn to access WERA 96.7 FM, but there is no streamed content, just a succession of TuneIn ads. The FCC website lists the station's license as still active, but it's unclear whether or not they are still broadcasting even within their limited range. An email I sent to Arl Now summarizes the situation. Do you have any recent information within the last month about WERA-FM and Arlington Independent Media? I have moved to Hagerstown and can no longer receive their signal. My most recent information was that WERA were technically hanging on to their FCC license by broadcasting canned material with no community-created content, but I wonder if that is continuing. The few people involved no longer respond to my emails. As for Arlington Independent Media, all I know is that Arlington County has not budgeted any money at all for them this year, and that AIM owed the county money for rental of space, in addition to a tax lien from last year. I have not received any replies to emails I sent to the county board for several months. My last communication from a former AIM leader confirmed that only AIM's membership can formally dissolve the organization. However, the inability of AIM to process payment for membership dues since late 2024 suggests that eligible voting membership is declining through sheer attrition. AIM's president, treasurer, secretary, and producer representative have all long since resigned, and the Arlington Independent Media website and Facebook pages have no recent information. I'm curious about the fate of AIM's equipment and other assets since I visited the old Wilson Boulevard location this past March to help clear things out. I'm also curious about monies owed to JBG Smith and other creditors. Please provide or post any information you have or can obtain. Thanks. At the very least, please acknowledge receipt of this email. It's more than anyone else has done lately. That was what I sent to Arl Now. Meanwhile, Google News searches have turned up no fresh results, and the so-called news section of the Arlington County Government website has had nothing to say about Arlington Independent Media since November of 2022. A second reason for the relative absence of Arlington news on this show is the availability of other sources, however selective in their reporting. The Arlington County government does provide information about police and criminal activity in the area via their crime reports, and there is plenty of reporting about things like the sustainability accolade for Arlington's new transit facility. There are also reports about RCV, that is ranked choice voting, funding, and speed cameras. Google News is another source, along with Arl Now and Arlington Magazine. For the Old Community Bulletin Board segment, Arlington's Parks and Recreation Department provides plenty of notice about upcoming events, and some individual organizations also post on Facebook. For example, there was another Pops for Pets concert announced by the Arlington Philharmonic for June 28th. The regular 55-plus walks for seniors are all well and good, but are they really news when they happen every week or so? Third, is the announcement of yet another closed session of the Arlington County Board really news, or is it more like the deliberate absence of news? Has anyone on the board explained why such sessions are closed to the public? Now I will offer some more non-news analysis and opinion. In addition to my participation with the Arlington Weekly News in the 1980s, 1990s, and 2010s, I also delivered newspapers, including the Washington Daily News, the Northern Virginia Sun, the Evening Star, later the Star News, and the Washington Post. It may surprise some people to learn that some paper boys, also called news carriers, actually read the papers they deliver. I also worked briefly for Fox News Service in the early 1990s, when they were an actual news-gathering organization sending reporters around the world. However, their various news stories were made available to their local affiliates, who would pick and choose which stories their viewers got to see. One day when I was working for Fox, I went in and looked at their 6 television screens, all without audio, each displaying a different version of what was going on in the news. One screen showed some squirrels riding water skis. Another showed a press conference with a buxom young lady wearing a bikini. Another was a telephoto shot of a man committing suicide with a handgun. Another was an indeterminate image of a desert war zone. Another showed a motionless image of the window of the Branch Davidian compound in Waco, Texas, during the armed standoff. And the last screen showed a man talking about something. With the sound turned off, it was impossible to determine the topic. What did viewers see on the news that day? That would depend on which affiliate was broadcasting. It could have included any combination of these images, or none of them at all. What I learned over the years is that the news that the public sees is limited to the news that the reporters and informants can obtain. Events without publicity may go unreported. Unreported theft is not mentioned, or at best is lumped into aggregated statistics. In broadcast news, there's a time constraint. There may be an hour's worth of reporting, but the program time in a television half-hour is around 25 minutes at best. And on a so-called slow news day, a producer may decide to pad out their time with interviews, usually not real news, local talent, usually not actual news, or, you guessed it, opinion and analysis. Then there is the problem of editorial bias, which is sometimes called a point of view or even journalism. It affects even the most conscientious producers. In addition, an examination of broadcast history reveals the influence of money, whether from sponsors, advertisers, a slightly different group, and government subsidies. The fate of Arlington independent media is illustrative of this last. When the money ran out, the broadcasts stopped. It is also interesting to note that when the film star Harold Lloyd launched his own radio anthology series, it was not called The Harold Lloyd Show or The Radio Anthology Comedy Show, but it was actually billed as Old Gold Comedy Theater, since it was sponsored by Old Gold cigarettes. Even print media has long since relied on advertising revenue in addition to subscriptions. Some could point out a few historical exceptions like the early Hearst newspapers, but these were merely funded by William Randolph Hearst himself, and he controlled their content. In 1981, the organization later called Arlington Independent Media began as PAC TV, short for Public Access Cable Television. Later on, it was called ACT, short for Arlington Community Television. Both names were accurate and descriptive. However, the name Arlington Independent Media was inaccurate in at least one sense. AIM relied on funding that came through the Arlington County Board. It was not financially independent. Financially independent news is at least theoretically possible. AIM has its own free YouTube channel, although they have failed to make it available for locally produced content from individual producers. And of course, there is this little show itself, which I produce without any financing whatsoever. When I still lived in Arlington, I could walk around the county, observe things, and talk to residents and visitors. Was a building being renovated? Were people playing soccer in a park in spite of COVID restrictions? Were there handmade posters advertising a yard sale or concert? There was no question about the oak mite infestations because I suffered them firsthand. I also attended county board hearings and open door meetings. Now I no longer reside in or near Arlington County, so for that kind of reporting I can only rely on information I obtain from other sources, and that has all but disappeared. So, what is the news? It's arguably that fragment of the publicly available information that a producer or broadcaster considers to be of local interest and deemed not to be antagonistic to the individuals and organizations who are providing the financial support. After all that, it is then trimmed to fit into the available time slot. You may notice that this show is only about half the length of my other installments, and I haven't padded it with extraneous content. I hope you'll understand. You see, the last couple of months have been kind of slow that way.